right, and here's the third type. Once again, the example says 288 is what percent of 640? So I usually highlight the of is my multiplication sign. The is my equal to. And then you've got a what percent, that's right here. That's your percentage. And then on the other side of the of, which is the 640, that's your base. And then it's going to equal, whoops, wrong color, equal your amount, which the equal of the amount's just over on this side. So there's the amount, the 288. There's, come on, there's your equal sign. The percent, well, that's what we're looking for this time. What's the percent of, so there's your time, times multiplication of the base. And I know the base is 640. So there it is. Percent times 640 equals 288. Once again, since we're trying to figure out one of the pieces, it's either you're taking this times this to give you this number. So you would take that number, which is our amount, take the 288 and divide it by the 640. And that is going to give you the percentage in decimal form, and then you simply multiply it times 100 to get it into percent form, which is 45%. I mean, if you think about it, what's half of 640? Half of 640 is 320. That would be 50%. Well, I don't have 320. I have 288. I'm pretty close. But it should be less than 50%. Full 45% sounds about accurate to me. So that sums up the 3% equation problems, just to go back over them. This one, we just used multiplication because I knew the two numbers on either side of the word of. So I just had to convert my 35% to 0.35 and then multiply it times 140. The other two involve division because you knew the total amount over here and you knew one of the two that you were multiplying together, but you were looking for the other. So you had to take your total amount and divide it by the one that you knew, which was the 0.18, to find the other that you're looking for. And the same thing happened on this one. I knew the amount and the base, but not the percent. So I had to take the 288 divided by the 640. And then, of course, on this one, I had to convert it back to percent form. The other two, they gave you the percentage, so you had to divide them by 100 to get them out of the percent form. Like this one, it was 35%, but we had to convert it to 0.35 first before we could do the math. Same thing on the next one. They gave us 18%, but we had to convert it to 0.18 before we did the math and solved for what we were looking for. All right? Which brings me to a word problem. A basketball team had a record of 53 wins and 29 losses. The question is, what percent of their games did they win? What percent of their games did they win? I know they played 45 games in which they won and 29 games in which they lost. So they played 82 total games. And then so that's your base. It's what percent of your total games turned out to be wins. So the wins are my 53. So really, you're just taking, I've got 53 wins out of 82 games that I played. You don't even have to do this if you don't want to. It's just logic. It's out of 82 total games. So anything out of anything will convert it into a percentage. Just like a minute ago, I was talking about, was it 640? 320 out of 640 is 1 out of 2. That's 1/2, 50%. So 53 out of 82 is 64.6%. And that's all you have to do on that. And then what's the next part talk about? Oh yes, taxes is the other thing. I don't know if you've ever seen a tax table before, but here's an example, or here is the tax table. If Jay is unmarried and has a taxable income of $41,458 a year, what is the amount of federal income tax that she owes? So the first thing you have to figure out is, what line am I on? And they've highlighted her line down here in this blue color, which I'm going to overlay with yellow, which will probably make it look green. There you go. This is where she would be, because it says your taxable income is over this number, but not over this number. And her number is 41,458. That would be in between these two numbers. It's over the 30,000 number, but it's under the 74,000 number. So anybody who has a taxable income that's in between these two numbers would be on line 3. And then you will be taxed this amount of money. So if you were exactly $30,650, if this was your yearly income, you would only pay $4,220. But if you're in between, you then have to pay an additional 25% of the amount over the low end of $30,650. So Jay, the first step we're going to have to do is figure out how much money over she makes. So they kind of did it all in one thing here, because it says she's got to pay this amount of money plus 25% of the amount over. If you subtract her yearly income minus the low end of $30,650, she makes $10,808 over the $30,650. So then they have to multiply that times 25%. She has to pay 25% of that $10,000, which means she has to pay an additional $2,702 on top of the $4,220 for being in that tax bracket there. So her total taxes for the year would be $6,920. And that is how that tax table works. Okay, as you're working through some of the math lab problems, you might read words like inflation and consumer index price. And here's just the definitions of those. You can refer back to those. Rate of inflation, if they ask you that, it's the same thing as percent of change. The new amount minus the base amount over the base amount, that's the same. And then there's a couple examples in here of the consumer price index, which this chart is showing. You know what? I'm going to do a separate video on this because I'm almost out of time and I don't want it to cut off in the middle. So we're going to come back to here and I'll talk about this again.